So, when I go back and I think about why I had such an issue with Dragon's Dogma, I think it always comes back to this quest that you have to do. It's like, depending on how quick you're moving, 30 minutes to an hour into the game, you've killed a boss. You really didn't even kill it. You just kind of poked it in the face and it died. But you poked it in the face and it died, and you got the head of his Hydra. And you're suddenly put into this escort quest. Now, this being an action RPG, and especially around the time when Dragon's Dogma launched, I think this was hitting the peak fatigue era of escort quests, right? So, you want to rush along, you want to go be fighting monsters, you want to do things. And especially coming from Capcom with Resident Evil 4, one of like the maybe best well-designed escort games ever made. And, you've got Ashley, and you can have her hide, and you've got really cool combat happening all the time. I think this really put people off. But what I'm here to talk about is not how bad the escort quest is. I still don't think it was a great choice. But I want to talk a little bit about how great Dragon's Dogma is in spite of that, and really encourage everyone out there who maybe bounced on the game in the past or heard the funny voice lines and thought it was too cheesy and not worth playing and everything else like that, thought maybe the combat wasn't any good, and try to really give it a fair shake. So I've been streaming this game for about 2 weeks on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SDShepherd, and I played as a fighter / mostly burly guy, transitioning into a Mystic Knight later on, really focused around doing some enchantments, a little bit of magic, and like counters and parries and stuff like that. And streaming it was a really great way to get into the game, because as you're suffering any oddities that you would encounter from a game that was created during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era, and especially given the history of Dragon's Dogma, a game that really got pretty massively toned down in scope. We got maybe 20 or 30% of what they had originally envisioned. You get to laugh at the funny things, but then as you play it, you really start to appreciate, man, maybe this combat is actually really, really good. The game's 10 years old at this point, or close to it. And I can honestly say there are things that are done in this game that aren't really done nearly as well anywhere else. So, is the enemy cast huge? Capcom, given Monster Hunter, everything like that, is no stranger to reskinning monsters and things like that. Take a Rathian, make it pink, you got a new monster, right? and Dragon's Dogma definitely does that. There are many different varieties of wolves, there's many different varieties of harpies, so on and so forth. But they always find a way to make them a little bit different, a little bit interesting. You're not going to see it on this little early game escort quest, but element matters quite a bit in this game. There's fire, thunder, ice, holy, and dark on its own. And then even beyond that, you have cutting and blunt. All of these things matter. Enemies have different resistances, enemies have different AI, and the way that they'll approach you, the way that they'll attack you, the way they'll respond, their various little functions just changes a little bit based on, their background. And so what we have here is a little bit of a solo gameplay. We're going to be streaming this character relatively soon, but I thought this would make for a fascinating backdrop for a discussion of Dragon's Dogma, because this quest is just so, despised. Everyone hates it, and I hated it too. But I think what we'll find is, even when you're not kicking this ox, the quest actually ends really quickly. And where this is taking you is Grand Soren, the main city hub of this world that really opens up a lot of quests to you, puts you at the center of the map, and then gives you maybe one of the most important items in the game, which is going to be the Eternal Fairy Stone. This game does have a quick travel system. The original release, and something that I have zero experience with, did have a quick travel system, but it was very limited. You had to purchase the fairy stones to travel from one area to the other, and where the game does suffer a little bit is if you're trying to do very long distance, far travel, especially on console when you don't have the ability to use mods or anything like that. You'll spend a lot of time sprinting, and then jogging, and then sprinting, and then jogging, and then sprinting, and then jogging. My first playthrough, I used a mod that did give me unlimited sprint and gave me unlimited carry weight, and I'm kind of glad I did it because it took those major annoyances out of the game and made it so, okay, you know, I can just focus on enjoying the combat and the story and the abilities in there. And I'm not going to say there's a right way or a wrong way to play it. I will say that I did eventually remove it. Obviously, I'm playing now without it. You can see there I was using my stamina as I was running. I actually don't know what to do with this rock. This is the one time we're going to kick this ox because I'm worried about him getting squished. But it actually gives you something to manage. So there are different classes in this game. The base classes are Fighter, which is exactly what you'd imagine. He's got a sword and a shield. Strider, he's got daggers and a bow. And a Mage. And we'll get into mages in a little bit. But these different vocations, as you kill enemies and gain experience in general, you get vocation points. Those vocation points will go towards your core skills, so just your basic combos and things like that. Your special skills, which ends up using stamina. And then augments, which are permanent passives that you can equip up to 6 of per character. And you can mix and match those, so you might have a special fighter augment that you may want to use in other classes. In my case, I'm using Sinew, which makes it so I can carry 20 more. So I'm playing as a goblin. Goblin's kind of interesting. He's not a real class, obviously. I took a little inspiration from a YouTube character creator. I'm not really any good at making my characters, but if you are, the character creator is very good. And so the size of your character will make a little bit of a difference. So, you know, smaller, lighter characters will regenerate stamina faster. They can climb around on things better, but they're more easily knocked back in combat and they cannot carry nearly as much. So little tiny guys like me, you know, for having a perk such as Sinew, which is going to allow me to carry a lot more weight and stay at a low encumbrance so that my stamina recovery and movement can be higher, is a pretty big deal. You can see here the ranged combat is just so fluid. You know, you have on basically every character a primary weapon and a secondary weapon. It's not 100% true. Warrior just has the one main ability, but you know, you'll have something like a weapon and a shield, or a primary weapon and a ranged weapon is usually what you'll see. And being able to switch back and forth between those two and the combinations you can have therein really opens up a pretty wide variety of how you want to build yourself in terms of what sort of gameplay style you like to play the most, or if you just bring backup weapons. So if I wanted, I'm playing as an assassin, I do have the ability to switch myself over to a sword and a shield if I wanted. Say I was fighting one really big heavy guy, so he had a lot of defense, and I wanted to have a more reliable way to try and block it with a shield as opposed to using my various dodge abilities. You know, that's an option. You know, they let you do that in this game. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. This character isn't even particularly maxed out. I do have a core skill that kind of gives me that kick combo that will allow me to knock things up into the air, and that's nice. But you can see between your light attack, your heavy attack, a core combo, and then jumping and then doing jumping attacks, you can already very early in the game start making some interesting combos, and that's not even using any of the main special skills. You know, when you first start the game, if you just play basic fighter, you unlock nothing. You know, it's a pretty boring class. I'm going to mash the X button. Every once in a while, I'll blink strike to finish and spend some stamina. And that's just about it. And it's such a shame because I know a lot of people got started in the game, didn't quite understand how the skill system worked, didn't get those core skills, didn't get any other additional skills. And then somewhere along the line, they were doing this quest and their ox died. And they're like, you know what? Not worth it. I don't want to do the ox quest. And I understand. But I would encourage you, you know, even without pawns, you can see here, this ox is doing just fine. Now, obviously, I've got a lot of experience in the game. The game automatically forces a pawn called Rook on you. He sucks, but he does have a heal spell. And if you're damaged at any point and you stand next to the ox, they will cast healing on you. And then that will heal the ox along with you. And so, you know, when I think about other games, I think a lot of people compare this game like, oh, is this like a Capcom Dark Souls, or, you know, is it like Skyrim? It's really difficult to compare it to really any of those things. You know, the combat was designed by the director of Devil May Cry. So in terms of cool combos, in terms of interesting enemy design, I don't know really of any other game in the world that comes close to Devil May Cry in terms of like pure combos and how that sort of system works in terms of being able to create cool, stylish looking attacks. Obviously, this has got a Capcom DNA. It would be odd not to also try and compare it a little bit to Monster Hunter. Biggest issue, of course, element matters, so you can't really compare it to that. I mean, it's really just its own thing. Early on, the story feels like it doesn't matter. You're this Arisen. You know, a lot of people will look at that and say, oh, you're just another generic chosen one. But as you explore the story and as you really get into the game, I think you start to really get an appreciation for how this world is designed, why it is the way it is. And it almost has like a real meta commentary on players and whatnot, especially as you start playing around with a pawn system and being able to exchange pawns with other players. You know, how they learn from you, how they learn from each other. As you can see, I'm obviously playing without pawns right now. But we're at 13 minutes. It's another 2 minutes to get to the gate. And so I'm going to show you some more interesting gameplay rather than just walking around. But, you know, I'd say don't let the Ox Quest scare you off. Bring a whole team of healers if you need to. Take some damage and walk next to the Ox if he starts dying. So probably the next most infamous thing is in the starting village you begin in, Casardis. There's this well that you're allowed to go into and accept a quest, and the guy's like, oh, be careful in that well. I heard scary monsters. And truth be told, this is not an area you want to go to at level 1 alone or with Rook. You'll probably die. But getting a couple levels, upgrading your gear up from rusted stuff makes a huge difference. And I think just shows you, like, how cool the caves look, how dangerous some of the enemies can be. These guys in particular, you really need to be careful. You need to cut off their tail. Causes them to drop their spears and take a little bit more damage, I believe. You can see your lantern can actually get taken out if you get wet. So I'm playing a very small character. In this case, I lost it. I got my lantern taken out because of a waterfall. But even if I were to try and reach down in like a puddle, I would lose my lantern. Whereas a taller character would not, because the lantern would be put up higher on their body. It's actually really cool, really funny. And I just love this skill, Pentad Shot. It basically turns your bow into like a little shotgun. It's just so cool. And maybe one of the coolest things in the game. Obviously, where you hit the monster matters, so as we can see, you know, he took targeted damage on his tail there. Even beyond that, you know, strikes to the head will deal slightly better damage. One thing to note about this game is it does have a... If there's one complaint and or criticism, is that damage in this game works against defense in an additive and subtractive manner. So in Monster Hunter, you could be fighting something with a 100 raw weapon, and because they're always taking a percentage damage of the damage that you're dealing, you could, in theory, kill it. In this game, monsters have a certain flat defense, and when you compare your weapon damage versus that defense value, if you're not able to break it, it could be nearly impossible, if not take actually like forever in order to kill them. So in that case, we've got the assassin with his daggers. There could theoretically be situations I will need to switch over to a sword, which has a higher base raw, just to try and break through enemies that have super high physical defense, assuming that I wouldn't have elemental daggers that would be able to keep up with it. So the game's on sale on Steam right now. It's under $10 during the summer sale. I do encourage you to check it out. I do have one more thing. I just recently played around with trying to figure out a way to set up hotkeys for items if you're on PC. So if you've got a gamepad you're using, and assuming you're going pawnless, you can basically set your D-pad to function essentially as a keyboard for 1, 2, 3, and 4. So on PC, there's no console game binds for your items, but you can still bind them to a keyboard. So assuming you're using Joy-to-Key, which will rebind your items based to different keys, you can set them around. Now, this is going to make it so it'll be kind of annoying if you're moving around with the D-pad in the menu because it'll keep switching everything around to 1, 2, 3, and 4. But assuming you're okay with that, and assuming you don't mind freaking out, shouting out commands at your pawns, which, I mean, I get it. Or if you're just playing solo, you can just use your items very quickly like that. So, something worth checking out. So again, I'm going to keep streaming this game. We're going to be doing a solo assassin playthrough. You check the Twitch VODs if you want to see the playthrough for when I was playing a Mystic Knight. That was a lot of fun, and I'm going to have a lot of fun doing another playthrough, at least until Stories 2 comes out. That playthrough should be finished by then. So I hope to see you over there. Otherwise, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Until next time, it's Shepard saying good luck, and have a good hunt.